She was a dragon. Part 2. The Origin of the Ancients. The suffocating aroma of burning garlic, scented candles, and the sharp electric tang of ozone hung so thickly in Kyle's living room that one could have sliced it with a blade. Outside the window, Archibald shifted from claw to claw, leaving a muddy imprint on the rain-slicked stone sill, and muttered darkly to himself. "Nora, if you faint from sheer anxiety in front of him right now, I swear I'll fly over and peck the back of your skull. Dragons do not panic over mere dates." "Shut up, Archibald," I retorted without parting my lips, drawing in a long, steady breath. Kyle's hand remained clasped around mine. His fingers were warm, and his gaze was unswerving, starkly honest, and stripped of all pretense. There was not a flicker of terror in his eyes, only a consuming, burning human curiosity laced with profound tenderness. "Kyle, you asked if I was ready to trust you," I began softly. "I am, but what I am about to show you defies the conventional boundaries of physics and common sense. Take a step back, please." He complied obediently, retreating 2 paces while keeping his eyes locked onto mine. Closing my eyes, I surrendered the suffocating constraints of my human guise. Complete transformation was out of the question. His apartment lacked the spatial dimensions required to prevent us both from vanishing beneath the rubble of 24 reinforced concrete floors. Instead, I merely permitted my primordial nature to bleed through the fragile facade of humanity. Across my skin, stretching from the hollow of my throat down to my wrists, a wave of iridescent, deep emerald scales surged forth, tipped with liquid gold. My fingernails lengthened, hardening into sleek, translucent obsidian talons. My eyes detonated into a brilliant, phosphorescent gold, the pupils collapsing into razor-thin vertical slits. And from behind my shoulder blades, accompanied by the crisp, tearing shriek of fine silk blouse fabric, unfurled a pair of compact, neatly folded leathery wings. The ambient temperature in the room plummeted instantly. The air vibrated, singing with the ferocious density of ancient magic. Kyle froze. The wine glass in his loose grip chimed softly against a shirt button. He tracked my gaze from my golden eyes down to the glittering scales along my forearms, past the talons, and finally up to the wings. 5 agonizing seconds ticked past. Then 10. "Right, pack your bags. He's about to dial an asylum or summon an exorcist," Archibald chimed in. Slowly, deliberately, Kyle stepped forward. He did not recoil. Instead, a staggering, dazzling wave of awe flared within his dark eyes, a wonder so pure it temporarily stripped me of speech. It was you," he whispered, extending a trembling hand. "On the tower." "It was," I admitted honestly, suppressing the deep, sub-audible dragon's purr rumbling in my chest. "I am a dragon, Kyle. Real. Breathing. I am over 3,000 years old. I consume more meat than a modest tavern, and I can hear the cadence of your thoughts." Kyle halted his palm a mere centimeter away from my scaled cheek. "May I?" I gave a silent, minimal nod. His fingers brushed against the impenetrable, cool armor of my cheekbone. A visible shiver raced down his frame, though it was born of reverence rather than dread, the trembling surrender of a mortal touching a living myth. "Gods, you are breathtaking," he breathed out. My eyelids fluttered, my golden pupils expanding in sheer astonishment. "What?" Archibald squawked indignantly from the windowsill, nearly losing his perch. He just called a 20-ton, fire-breathing apex predator Breathtaking? This boy's self-preservation instincts are entirely non-existent. You aren't afraid? I asked, letting the mortal guise flood back over me. The scales melted beneath my dermis, the wings dissolved into empty air, and my irises settled back into their familiar hazel hue. Only the jagged tear down the spine of my blouse stood as testament to the shift. I restore structures that have stood for 3 centuries, Nora, Kyle murmured, flashing that broad, slightly unhinged grin of his as he poured himself another measure of wine. I've spent my entire life hunting for proof that our world isn't merely an endless cycle of concrete, quarterly reports and debt. And now you're telling me the woman I've fallen for can incinerate a city block and takes nocturnal flights? This is the absolute best-case scenario. He took a sip, his brow furrowing instantly. Wait, what about that owl on the balcony? A sharp, imperious rap of a beak against glass shattered the silence. I sighed, crossing to the balcony and swinging the French doors wide. Archibald strutted into the room with supreme arrogance, ruffled his damp feathers, and unceremoniously claimed the backrest of Kyle's luxury leather armchair. "Greetings, mortal," the owl rasped, rotating his head a full 180 degrees. "I am Archibald, supreme avian, custodian of forbidden lore, and the sole intellect currently operating in this room. Furthermore, your pasta sauce is catastrophically oversalted." Kyle sank slowly onto the sofa, his gaze ping-ponging between me and the talking raptor. "Fine," he conceded. "I require a moment to recalibrate regarding the conversational poultry. Nora, tell me everything. How? Why are you here? Where did your kind even originate?" The Chronicle of the Ancients, the legend of the fall. I settled opposite him, drawing my legs up beneath me. Archibald set to preening his plumage, occasionally interjecting with caustic commentary as I submerged Kyle into the forgotten annals of my species. "We did not always walk or fly upon the crust of earth," I began softly. "Millennia ago, this realm was an entirely different tapestry. There were no rigid borders separating the physical plane from the ethereal. Dragons, high beings, elemental spirits, we coexisted within a unified continuum that your modern tongues might approximate as the primordial hearth." "Were you gods?" Kyle interjected. "No, we were the structural pillars," I corrected. "Dragons anchored the density of matter. Our flame is not merely combustion. It is the fundamental binding energy anchoring atomic matrices and metaphysical threads alike. As for the high beings, they were the architects of concept. They authored the laws of physics, the mechanics of chronology, the resonance of thought." "Until the regulators arrived," Archibald interjected, letting his beak click sharply. "Bureaucratic pedants from higher dimensions who found our chaotic mastery deeply offensive." "Precisely," I nodded. "A cataclysmic threshold was breached, the Great Shift. The high beings decreed an antiseptic cleansing of all unruly macro life forms. We were cast out of our native continuum, hurled downward through the tiered strata of reality like burning meteors. Countless perished. Yet a fraction of us, roughly 100 dragons, succeeded in breaching the barrier, anchoring our descent here upon Earth." Kyle listened, breath suspended, the candlelight dancing in the depths of his pupils. "It occurred during an epoch when humanity was barely learning to shape mud and unbaked clay into settlements," I continued. "We assisted your ancestors in surviving the crucible. The archetypes of dragons embedded within the lore of ancient China, Sumeria, Mesopotamia, and the Slavic steppes. These are merely ancestral echoes of the era when we walked openly among you. We taught your kind metallurgy, load-bearing architecture, and the mathematics of the stars. And afterward, why the concealment? Because humanity evolved, Archibald rasped dryly. Avarice metastasized. The moment your kind deduced that dragon scales could turn any blade, and that a dragon's heart could theoretically unlock ageless vitality, open season was declared. The high beings, weaving their designs from the shadows, weaponized humanity against us, propagating the gospel that all draconic life was an aberration of evil. So we withdrew into the deep shadows, I concluded gently. We mastered the art of condensing our ancient, volatile cores down to the volumetric equivalent of a human heartbeat. It was an agonizing adaptation, but the singular path to survival. We bled into your burgeoning civilizations. We helped lay the foundations of Rome, survived the dark attrition of the Middle Ages, engineered your modern sciences. And now, here we occupy the metropolis. I function as an investigator because my telepathy and draconic sensory perception allow me to extract truths where human perception is entirely blind. And the high beings? Kyle's mind latched onto the entity atop the tower. Why was that thing hunting me? I exchanged a heavy glance with the owl. Do you recall the archival folio and architectural schematic you recently deciphered within your restoration studio? I asked. Kyle froze, his face draining of color. Yes. It was a blueprint mapping the deep subterranean foundation of a forgotten temple I exhumed from municipal records. That was no mere house of worship, Kyle, Archibald intervened, launching himself from the armchair to land squarely on the center table, fixing the young man with an unblinking gaze. It was an anchor lock of the primordial seal. The high beings are currently waning in potency. This sprawling urban sprawl of yours is erected directly atop a global intersection of ley lines and ancient sorcery. They seek to shatter the boundary, draining the vital essence of this city to reconstitute their lost dominance. And you, entirely oblivious to your own trespass, picked the lock. Meaning, Kyle swallowed hard, they are coming back for me? So long as I draw breath, they will try over my smoking ashes, I replied, my voice dropping an octave into the subterranean resonance of the beast. I will reduce them to elementary particles. But realistically, yes, you are compromised. You possess knowledge they cannot permit to circulate. A heavy, suffocating silence settled over the parlor. Outside, the rain escalated, driving against the glass pane like millions of lead-shot pellets. Kyle stared at me, then down at his own hands, and finally, a slow, utterly reckless grin spread across his features. Well, he murmured, retrieving his wine goblet. It appears my career as an architectural historian has suddenly acquired a rather fascinating trajectory. Nora, if this city rests upon ancient sorcery foundations, I intend to help you defend it. Have you lost your mind? The owl squawked, wings flaring in disbelief. You are a biological fragile. You could be snapped like a dry twig by a stray thought. Conversely, I can read antique blueprints, navigate every forgotten utility tunnel, and map every ancient subterranean foundation in this concrete labyrinth better than anyone alive, Kyle countered, locking his gaze onto mine. And I refuse to leave a dragon woman to face cosmic parasites alone. I held his gaze, a profound realization settling deep within my chest. This man was completely, magnificently unhinged, which naturally rendered him irreplaceable. "Very well, partner," I whispered softly, extending my hand across the table. "Though, be advised, tactical conditioning begins at dawn, and our first real stop involves a trip to Paris." Kyle blinked in genuine confusion, his hand sliding smoothly into mine. "Paris? To what end?" "We require an audience with the High Council of the Gargoyles," Archibald announced, executing a precise tactical dive from the table back to his favorite perch. "Authentic gargoyles are not decorative masonry slapped onto Gothic facades for aesthetic vanity. They are the premier nocturnal wardens of Europe. They maintain the master ledger of all high beings registered on this terrestrial plane and police their incursions. If the tectonic fractures opening beneath our city are merely the opening salvo, the Gargoyle Council alone possesses the cartography of the next structural fissures." The Paris Accord. Exactly 1 week later, an autumnal Paris welcomed us with a sweeping evening fog, the rich aroma of roasted chestnuts, and the damp, aristocratic chill of ancient masonry. Though we had hardly crossed the Atlantic merely to admire the Eiffel Tower, by the following morning, Paris had transformed into a vision of blinding, effortless beauty. The autumn sun, fracturing through the golden canopy of linden trees, washed the rain-cleansed cobblestones in a rich, amber glow. We occupied a minuscule round iron table at an open-air café lining the Boulevard de la Grande Armée, perfectly framed by the majestic sweep of the Arc de Triomphe. The crisp air buzzed with the intoxicating perfume of freshly ground Arabica beans and buttery, warm croissants. Kyle bit into a flaky pastry with hearty enthusiasm, his eyes squinting against the luminance. "You know, Nora, if not for the minor detail that we flew across an ocean to parley with ancient stone executioners, I would be inclined to classify this as the ideal romantic weekend." "Do not flatter yourself, wingless one," muttered a dry, gravelly voice emerging from the deep trenchcoat pocket resting beside my chair. Archibald was huddled within its folds, safely screened from the waitstaff's curious eyes, muttering darkly. "French pigeons are uncultured hooligans. They attempted to engage me in vulgar dialect, and I happen to be a high avian." I simply smiled, taking a deliberate sip of my scalding, rich espresso. At that precise juncture, an impeccably groomed elderly Frenchman draped in a pristine white apron, the establishment's proprietor, navigated toward our table. His posture carried that distinct, unyielding poise unique to individuals who understood Paris far beyond the sanitized boundaries of tourist guidebooks. "Mademoiselle Nora," he murmured with flawless articulation and a genuine sunlit smile, inclining his head. "A distinct privilege to welcome you back to our humble corner of the boulevard. It has been, 3 years?" "Close to 4, Pierre," I replied in fluent French, returning his warm expression. "And you continue to pour the finest espresso on the right bank." "You flatter an old man, mademoiselle," Pierre said smoothly, extracting a heavy, cream-colored linen envelope from his waistcoat pocket, sealed with a thick blob of unembossed crimson wax. "A courier delivered this at dawn. Explicit instructions dictated it must pass directly into your hands the moment your breakfast concluded." "Thank you, Pierre." The proprietor offered a polished nod, wished us an exceptional morning, and melted back into the interior bustle of the bistro. I broke the seal. The heavy paper exhaled an unmistakable antiquity, a blend of mineral dust, subterranean chill, and ancient granite. The crimson wax crumbled beneath my thumb. Extracting the folded vellum, my eyes skimmed the chiseled, chisel-etched calligraphy. "What does it say?" Kyle leaned forward, setting his coffee aside. I lifted my gaze to meet his, reading the verdict aloud. "The gargoyles will receive us. The summit is set. Deep tonight." By the dead of night, having descended through a covert utility breach hidden deep within the subterranean limestone catacombs, we crossed the threshold into the shadow vault, sealed miles below the foundations of Notre-Dame Cathedral. The atmosphere bled millennial frost. Towering stone ribs vanished upward into impenetrable shadow, while along the perimeter walls, massive, rune-carved statues of winged sentinels slumbered upon Gothic plinths. Kyle walked shoulder to shoulder with me, monitoring his breathing to prevent echoing, though his pulse hammered like a trapped war drum. Archibald remained vigilant upon my shoulder, his feathers compressed flat. Without warning, an immense silhouette detached itself from the load-bearing stone masonry. The central gargoyle statue galvanized into motion. With a teeth-gritting, thunderous grind of ancient granite grinding against granite, two deep fissures split its chest as a pair of colossal, soot-stained pinions snapped wide open. Two eyes, burning like white-hot forge coals, locked directly upon our intrusion. The supreme gargoyle lowered its monstrous stone cranium, towering over our trio as its voice resonated through the bedrock like an oncoming seismic shift, rattling the floorboards beneath our boots. "Dragon, avian, and mortal, you are late. The seal has been fractured. He has already awakened."